We begin today the Gemara on Daf Tesa with Beis at the Mishnah, the new Perek, the third Perek of Masechta Krisis. This actually continues what we were speaking about in the previous Perek regarding the Kohen Mashiach. That's the Kohen Gadol that's anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha, and the halachas of his karbonis by Achatos when he does an Aveda B'Sheigig are unique. Zok Heilige Mishnah Kohen Mashiach Shechata, the Kohen Mashiach that sinned. But then V'achakach Avam Mishichusai, he was removed from his position of being a Kohen Gadol, whether because he became too old or because he has a mum, so he was removed. Or v'chein nasi shechata, or a case of a king. The nasi, as the Gemara will prove and explain, the Mishnah later will explain, it refers to the king that sinned. But then v'achach avam migdulasai, he was demoted from his level of being a king. So what happens now? That original special halacha of their carbon that they bring when he was a king, or when he was a kohen gadol, does it still apply now? So Kohen Mashiach may be par. The Kohen Mashiach will still bring his par, that which is not the regular carbon for carbon chatas. It's the par similar to what the tzibur brings, a par. And Vahanasi may be soy. And also the nasi will still bring his unique carbon, which is not a seira, the female, but a soir, the zachar, a he goat. That's the halacha in this case. When they sinned, when they were a kohen gadol or a nasi, a melech, and then they were demoted. Now, Mashiach, Shavam Mishichusai, what happens if over here the Kohen Gadol was removed from his position, and he only sinned after this? Or the king that was removed from his level, he's not a king anymore, only then did he sin. So it would seem, and here in this case, regarding both of them, the halacha should be that now they bring a regular carbon. But the Mishnah says, no, there's a difference. Kohen Mashiach may be par. The Kohen Mashiach will still bring that unique carbon that he brought when he was a Kohen Gadol. But the Nasi, now that he's not a king anymore, he becomes like a commoner and he brings a regular carbon. So there's an explanation that it says here in the Pirush HaMishnayos of the Rambam that a Kohen Gadol that's demoted is different than a king. Because a Kohen Gadol, he was anointed with that oil and he gets a certain level of Kedusha, even if he can't serve as a Kohen Gadol anymore, but that level of Kedusha never leaves him fully, at least. But by the king, when he's demoted, so then the whole mile of the king is that he's above the Klal Yisrael, and he's the highest level near Hashem, as the Gemara will bring the pasuk later. But once he's demoted, that doesn't apply anymore. So therefore, he's a commoner.
The king is not anointed?
No, we're not. No, I mean there are kings that are anointed. You're right, yeah, but that's not relevant for this. It doesn't bring him this level of kedusha. It doesn't change that. Okay, now the Gemara will first ask on the language of the Mishnah, the first case of the Mishnah. Why is it that something seems to be extra here? Because now, hashte yesh loimar avam mishichusai v'ach kachata. So we could say over here regarding the Kohen Gadol that in a case where he was already removed from his level, that he was anointed, and only afterwards did he sin. So what did we say regarding the Kohen Gadol? By the Kohen Gadol, the chiddush is that even then he sinned after he was removed. That maybe par that he brings, that same special par is going to still apply. If so, the first case of the Mishnah, when it says regarding the Kohen Gadol, that's extra. Because over there it's saying, chata, he sinned when he was a Kohen Gadol. Only afterwards was he removed from this level that he was anointed to. You have to say that over there he's going to bring the special carbon of the par. Obviously, even if he sinned after he was removed, he maintains that special halacha of bringing the par. Answers the Gemara, you're right, that itself is not a chiddush, but regarding the king, there is a chiddush here. Mishom de katani gabi nasi. Since regarding a king, it says, once he was removed, and only afterward he sinned, kehedyet, he becomes like a regular person. Kehedyet maisi, that is, he brings the carbon like a regular person. And therefore, regarding the king, it is necessary to tell me in the first case of the Mishnah that if he sinned before he was removed, and then he was removed, that he still brings that special carbon as a king. So since regarding the Nasi, it's a Chiddush, so ahachitani gabe Mashiach, chata v'achkachava. So therefore, it also brings this halacha regarding the Kohen Mashiach that sinned, and afterwards he was removed, that may be par, that he brings the special bowl. Even though it's not a Chiddush, but since regarding the king, there is a Chiddush here, so it brings it together. Okay, but now here the Gemara brings the source in the Psukim. Where do we see, why should there be a difference between the king and the Kohen Gadol if they sinned after they were removed? So Minan Emili, what's the source for this? The Tan Rabbanan, because we learned in the Brayso, so the pasuk says by the Kohen Gadol, v'hikriv al chatasai, he brings the carbon on his sin. So when it says al chatasai, that's extra, it's obvious. So what is it saying here? Melamed, it's teaches shemevi chatasai misha avar, that he brings on the chet that he was over, even after he was removed of his position, he still brings that special carbon as a Kohen Gadol. Now the Braisa explains, Shiyachal, I would think to say, V'haloi dinu, I should learn this from a Kal V'chaimer and say as follows, Uma nosi, if when it comes to the king, Shemevi b'shigigas ma'aseh, the king, the quality of his shegig is a regular kind of shegig on the action that he did, like any other commoner. So he's not so different from any other person. Now, but ein mevi chatose misha'avar, he doesn't bring a carbon chatos after he was removed. Mashiach she'ein mevi b'shigigas ma'aseh, the Kohen Mashiach, by him it's much more limited. By the Kohen Mashiach, he doesn't bring even a chatos on a regular kind of a shegig. When he's a Kohen Gadol, he brings the carbon chatos only elo al helem davar im shigigas ma'aseh. It has to be where he made a mistake in a psak din, and then only based on that he acted. That's the only case that that's the only case where he brings his carbon chatos. So lekol shekain. So most definitely, I should say that by the Kohen Gadol it's much more limited, and therefore this should only apply if he sinned as he was a Kohen Gadol, not afterwards. So that's what I would think. I would compare it to I would learn with a Kal V'chaimer from the Nasi. Therefore, the pasuk comes and teaches and says, no, v'hikriv al chatasai. The extra words of al chatasi says, melamed. It teaches me shemevi al chatasai mishava, that he does bring his special carbon, even if he sinned after he was demoted from his position of being a Kohen Gadol. So now the Gemara asks, if so, why wouldn't I say a Kal V'chaimer in reverse? So why wouldn't I say that I should make a Kal V'chaimer now regarding the king, and I can learn the halacha of the king that sinned after he was demoted from the Kohen Gadol? The following Kal V'chaimer, Uma Mashiach, if when it comes to the Kohen Gadol, she'ein maybe b'shigas ma'aseh. So his carbon is not for a regular shegig. It's only with the added helem dover, when he made a wrong psak din. Maybe chatas misha'avar, so even though it's more limited, but nevertheless we say that even if this happened after he was demoted, he still brings that unique carbon. Nasi shemevi chatas b'shigas ma'aseh, so the nasi that brings a carbon even for a regular kind of shegig, ein edin shemevi chatas misha'avar. So you would think the svara should be that definitely it should apply after he was demoted from his position, that he should still bring that special carbon that he brings, which is actually a sire. Therefore, by the nasi, the pasuk says, Asher nasi yechta. What does this mean? That if he sinned when he was a nasi, keshehu nasi. Only if the sin happened while he was a nasi. Then he brings that special carbon. Keshehu hadiyit loy. But if he was already demoted and then he sinned, that original halacha does not stay. Now you're just like a regular commoner that brings a carbon. So here, the Tana is going to speak about the opposite case, where we're speaking about a case where he was a Kohen Gadol, he was a king, and then he got demoted. What's if the case is before he became promoted to being the Kohen Gadol or the king? He already sinned from before. So the Mishnah says, if they sinned before they were appointed, and then they became appointed, whether a Kohen Gadol or a king, they will have the halacha like a plain individual that since they sinned before they were promoted, they bring a regular carbon chatas, like every yid. Rab Shimon says, we don't only look at the actual Aveda itself. It also, there's another detail you have to look at. Not only they sinned before they were promoted, but they also found out about the sin before they were promoted. Then chayavim, then they're chayav to bring a regular carbon like everyone else. But umishin ismanu, if they only found out about the aveda that they did after they were promoted, then peturim, then they will be poter. Because so you see, according to Rab Shimon, it's not only the actual aveda itself that is going to decide whether they bring this carbon or not. It's the idea. The finding out is a chelik of what causes the chiyuv. So only if they found out from before, then will I say that they're still going to bring that regular carbon like a commoner.
Where they appointed if they had sinned.
Similar also, Rashi says that in the previous Mishnah, when we spoke about once they were appointed and then they sinned, and then they were demoted, according to Rab Shimon, even though it wasn't spelled out in the previous Mishnah, it's going to apply there as well. That the idea of the person is what matters. Or in this case, the Kohen Gadol and the king, the idea of the person matters for the chiyuv of the carbon as well. Now, the Mishnah explains, Izel nasi. When we're speaking here, can't see about the nasi. The lashon of the pasuk is the nasi. You may think it refers to a nasi of each individual tribe. No, says the Mishnah says Zeh Melech. We're referring here to the king. Shanema, because when it speaks about the nasi, the pasuk says we call mitzvah Hashem ulikov that he was over one of the mitzvahs Hashem Eloi Kov. What's this expression? She'en al gabo vel Hashem Eloi Kov. This is the individual that has no one above him other than Hashem, and that's the king. So from where do I know this halacha of the Mishnah? When he sinned before, and then he was promoted, that he'll bring the carbon like when he was a commoner. Because the Tanna Rabbana we learned in the Braise, if the Kayin Mashiach will sin. What does this mean? Prat l'kaidmais. That excludes the sins that were before. It says if the Kayin Mashiach, when he's the Kayin Mashiach, then he sins, not before. Now, I would think to say that I can learn this from a Kal V'chaimer. If when it comes to the Nasi, as we said before, he brings a carbon chatos for a regular kind of a shegi. But maybe he does not bring for what he sinned before he was promoted, as the Gemara is soon going to learn out. So Mashiach, if so, when it comes to the Kayin Mashiach, she'ei maybe el al helam davar, he brings only on a unique kind of a shaking, only if there was a mistake that he made in the psaktin, im shigigas ma'isa, and then he acted upon this. So it's much more limited by him. It's much more unique. So for sure, I should say that he would not bring on if he sinned before he was appointed as a Kohen Gadol. So why do I need this pasuk to teach it to me? I could learn it out from the Nasi. So the answer is, I can't learn out from the Nasi, because in Amarta ben Nasi, if you see this halacha by the Nasi, the reason is, because the Nasi, I see that after he was demoted, then he sinned, he will not bring a unique carbon. He will bring a regular carbon after he was demoted. But Taima ben Mashiach, as we saw in the Mishnah before, but when it comes to the Kayin Mashiach, when after he was demoted, he still brings a special carbon if he sinned at that time. So I would think to say, if I see if after he was demoted, he still brings a special carbon even if he sinned at that point. I should say that the same should apply, that if he sinned before he was promoted, and then he was promoted, maybe you should bring a special carbon of the Kayin Mashiach. Therefore, we bring a pasuk, Talmud Leima HaMashiach Yechta, that Chata Keshu Mashiach maybe. If he sinned when he was a Kohen Mashiach, he brings that carbon, Keshu Hadiyat, any maybe. But if he sinned from before and then he becomes promoted, he does not bring that carbon. Okay, so this is the Braisa that explains the source regarding the Kohen Gadol and explaining why we need a pasuk and you can't rely on a Kal V'chaimer. But Navatanya Nami Gabi Nasi Kai Gavna. But then there's another Braisa where it goes through the same thing regarding the Nasi, a pasuk, and explaining why you can't learn it with a Kal V'chaimer, or reverse that opposite Kal V'chaimer. Now, what does it say by the Nasi? The Braisa says, it says, Asher Nasi Yechta. What does that mean? If the Nasi will sin, that means Prat L'kaidmais. This unique carbon of the Nasi is only if he sinned as a Nasi, excluding if he sinned from before. Now, over here as well, I would think, I don't need a pasuk. I can learn this with a Kal V'chaimer, because V'alei Din of the Kal V'chaimer would be now in the reverse. If the Kayin Mashiach brings his carbon, his unique carbon, even after he was demoted and he sinned then, but any maybe elakaidmas. But if he sinned before he was promoted, then he does not bring a unique carbon. So Nasi, but regarding the Nasi she'ei maybe chatas misha'avar, after he was demoted and he sinned then, he does not bring a special carbon. So Einidim, most definitely I would say shelo yaveh elakaidmas, that he shouldn't bring a special carbon if he sinned before he was promoted. So I can learn with this Kal V'chaimer, what do I need a pasuk for? But on that, I'll say, no, there's a percha to the Kal V'chaimer. Ma'ala Mashiach sheken ei maybe b'shigas ma'isa. By the Kayin Mashiach, his carbon that he brings for a shaygig is not for a regular kind of shaygig. So therefore, if he sinned before, he's not going to bring that regular carbon after he was promoted. But Taima ben Nasi, but when it comes to the Nasi, the king, Shemei b'shigas ma'isa, since his carbon is for a regular kind of shaygig, so Hayla maybe b'shigas ma'isa, even after he was promoted, he's not that different from before because he brings in a regular shegig. Yavi ala kaidmais. Maybe he should bring for the aveda that he did before he was promoted. Talmud Laima, therefore, we do bring a pasuk to teach this. Asher nasi yechta, that the king sinned. Shachata v'hareu nasi. He sinned when he was a king. V'lei shachata v'edeu hadiyat. Not if he sinned when he was still a regular person. Okay, now because we quoted this pasuk of Asher Nasi Yechta, the Gemara is going to bring a few different drashas that we learn from this unique term of the pasuk Asher Nasi Yechta. So Tanna Rabbana we learned in Abraham Asher Nasi Yechta when it says and that the Nasi sinned. Now the chiddush in this language of Asher, it sounds like he will. He sinned. It doesn't say if. It doesn't say im. So it sounds like Yachal Gezeire. I would think that this is a decree that Hashem is saying that this bad thing will come to pass and the Nasi will sin. So Talmud Laimar, therefore it says regarding the Kohen Gadol that sins, Im HaKohen HaMashiach Yechta, if the Kohen Mashiach will sin, and therefore even though here it says Asher, but I compare it to what it says by the Kohen Gadol. Mala alon likasha yechta, just like by the Kohen Gadol, it means if he will sin. Afkan likasha yechta, it only means if he will sin. Now, why it does say the term Asher, the Gemara will darshan, but it doesn't mean that it's excited that a bad thing will come to happen. It still only means if. So the Gemara explains this brayso. Oh, Mamar, the Tana, the brayso said Yochel Gzeira. I would think that this is a decree. What kind of a decree? Why would you think that the term Asher means a decree that he will sin? So Amri, they answer, yes, this could be, we Ashkechan, we find something similar. The Chsiv, the Pasuk says, read in commentary to Yisrael, I will give that there will be a nega in the houses that you will inherit. So the Brisa says, this is actually news that Hashem is telling them a fact that this will happen. It's not if, but there will be a nega on your house. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. There's the famous medrash that Rashi brings, that this is in order to find the treasures, that the guy hidden the walls, Hashem gives a nega to have to knock it out and find it. So we see that the term here, it's talking about a nega tzara simply. I mean, here the Gemara is not focusing on the fact that you'll find treasures, but it's a nega is a bad thing. You'll have to break your house. And the pasuk is saying this bad thing will come to happen. So similar here, when it says Asher Nasa Yachta, we could say that it's excited that this bad thing will happen. Now, Rab Shimon Aimer, regarding this pasuk of Negayim, Rab Shimon says it's not saying that it will happen, but it's coming to say Prat Linege Einsen. The reason the pasuk is saying Hashem says I will give you this nega, because that's excluding a case where a nega comes by some other external way, which is called here an einis. The Gemara will soon explain what this external way is. Then it's not a nega. Okay, so now the Gemara says, La Rabbi Yehuda b'sura. Didn't Rabbi Yehuda say regarding the nega, which simply is a bad thing, that this is Hashem giving you the news that this will happen? Over here as well, when it says Asher Nasa Yachta, I would think that it's excited that Hashem is saying that this bad thing will come to pass, that the king will sin. So therefore, by the Kohen Mashiach, it says the term im. We know to compare it to there, and the fact that it says here Asher is a different reason, as the Gemara will darshan later. But now here, since we brought up this union of Negayim, the Gemara explains what's this Nigay Einsen. Or Rab Shimon, Nigay Einsen, Miloi Metamu, a nega that comes with an external cause, which is called an Einis, is this not something that will cause Tomeh? Tanya, but we learned in the Braisa. When it says in the pasuk in the beginning of the parsha of Negayim, and here we're speaking about the Negayim that's on the skin of the person's body. Adam ki a man that will have this nega in his body. What is ki? If it will be saying future tense, min adibur ve'elech. This is only from this time forward. So some say this means from Matan Torah forward, if you have a nega, or from when Hashem said this command and Moshe Rabbeinu gave over the command to Eden. If a person had a nega on his body from before he heard this command, and now he looks at his body and he still sees that nega because he had it from before already, it's not going to be tamei. Only min adibu ve'elech.
Now, the Kohen looks at it, he has to declare it prior to that.
Yeah, correct. No. It's a different point there. The point there is, when did the nega appear on the skin of his body? Before they heard the mitzvah. If the nega appeared in the body before they heard the mitzvah, then that nega will not be tamei. It has to be a nega that appeared in the skin of the body after they heard the mitzvah from Hashem. Now, I would think, why not learn this with a Kal V'chaimer? Tamei bizov, a person becomes tamei if he has this an emission, and the tamei b'negayim. And he becomes tamei if he has the nega. So why not compare and say, ma zav min adibba ve'elech, just like the tumah of zav is only after they heard the mitzvah, af negayim min adibba ve'elech. So I should say the same would apply by a nega, that only if the nega appeared on the skin after they heard the mitzvah, then he's tamei. So why do I need this pasuk here? So for this I say, I can't compare it to the zav. Loi, because imamarta bezav, when it comes to the zav, there's a limitation to his tumah. Shekain ain't metame ba'inus. A zav, if he has this emission, it's not if it happened through an inus. If he had something, he jumped, or he did something, he fell, and that caused this emission, he won't be tamei. Tamei b'negayim shemitamen ba'inus. By a nega, you are tamei even if the nega appeared with an inus. So now here, you clearly see in this brayso that a nega is tamei even with an einus. Okay, now Talmud Laimar, therefore I need the pasuk to teach Adam kiyeh min adibba ve'elech, that nevertheless the tumah of the nega is only if it appears on the person's skin after they heard the mitzvah. So how do we answer this? Is a nega causing tumah even with an einus or not? So Rava says, you know what the Braisa meant when it says a nega of an einus, that it will not cause tumah? It's a unique kind of an einus. Prat lenige ruchais. This is a kind of a nega that comes by a shade that blew with a ruach and caused this nega. That's what ruchas means. So we're not talking about some kind of illness that caused this nega, but a ruach. Rav Papa Amar prat lenigay kshofim. A nega that appears in your body, but it's caused by sorcery. So it's not a nega b'chlal. The Mefarshim, I think the Rogachover says that it's not only that it's not tomei, it's actually not even the same quality of a nega at all. It's just an external appearance that's caused by a shed or by a kishuv. So therefore, that's the kind of aynus of a nega that's not going to be tomei.
Who makes that distinction on the king? It's on the king. This is
No. This we're talking about the negoim here. Talking about negoim now.
Person.
Yeah, sure, on any person, correct. Yeah, I mean the thing is the kohen that's that's analyzing this nega is going to have to know. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure how he's going to figure out that it came from kishuv or from a shindalet. Yeah. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to the pasuk of Asher Nosiyachta. Tan Rabbana, so we learned in the Brayso when it says Asher Nosiyachta, this unique expression prat l'chayle comes to exclude the king that is ill. So the Gemara asks, how could you say we're excluding a king that's ill? He's not feeling well, so now he's not on his level as being a king. He's not well, but he's still a king. Rabbi Avdimi Bar Chama explains, no, it just means prat l'nasishin, it started, not just ill. A nasi that became a mitzayra, then he's demoted. Shanema, the pasuk says, Vaynaga Hashem es hamelech, that the Abisha brought a neg on the king. This is Uziyahu HaMelech. Vayi Mitzayre became a Mitzayre ad Yemez until the day that he died. Vayeshev b'veis hachavshis. He sat in the house of being free. Vayesam ben HaMelech alabayis. And Yesam ben HaMelech was in the house of the king. Now, what does the term beis hachavshis mean? Ka'ama beis hachavshis. It says that it was in the house where he was free. So that means that he was demoted from his kingdom. And the Gemara says, so why does it mean you were freed from your kingdom? It should mean what? You were demoted. I was freed from this. So the Gemara says that means miklal da'at ashte eved hava. A king thinks he has a great position, and he does, but he's really subservient. He's an eved, and now that he's demoted, he doesn't have that responsibility anymore, and that hard work as a king. So now that's why it uses the term that he was freed, because he doesn't have to do that work anymore. So that means that until now, every king is really an eved, is really a servant. So, okay, so here we see this idea that excludes the king that was demoted. But now the Gemara here brings this term of being freed, that a king is like an eved. We see this in the story. Kihal de Rabbi Gamliel ve Rabbi Yeshua havazli besvinte bahadi de Rabbi Gamliel. So again, let me read this again. Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua havazli besvinte. They were both traveling together on a boat. Now, Bahadi did Rabbi Gamliel have a pita. Rabbi Gamliel had bread with him. Bahadi Rabbi Yeshua have a pita v'sulta. Rabbi Yeshua had bread, but also flour. So he was better prepared for this journey. In case he runs out of the bread, he has flour to bake more bread. So Shalem pita de Rabbi Gamliel. So Rabbi Gamliel finished his bread. So Samach hasulta de Rabbi Yeshua. He had to rely on the flour of Rabbi Yeshua to bake more bread. Amalei, so Rabbi Gamliel says to Rabbi Yeshua, Mi have a yadis. Did you have information from before the Havizlan Ikuve Kula Hai that we would be held up on our journey for such a long time, the Asa Sulta, and therefore you brought flour? How did you know this? Amalei, so you answered him, yeah, I had an indication, because Keichav Echad, there's one star, the northern star, that L'shivim Shana Oile, in once in 7 years it goes up in a certain position, Umasa Saponim, and it confuses the captains on the boat that they see this northern star, and that's their compass to know where they're going. But once in 70 years they get confused with this. Vamarti, and I had a speculation. I said, Shema Yala V'Yasa Isano, that maybe now this is the time when this northern star will confuse us, and therefore we're going to be stuck on this journey for a longer time. So I brought flour. Amalei, Rabbi Gamliel tells him, Kol kach b'yotcha, you have so much information in your hands, meaning you're so wise. And v'atoyle b'sfina, and nevertheless you have to travel on these journeys overseas, apparently for making a living, and you can't figure out, be smart, and make a parnasa without having to travel on these journeys. Amalei, so Rabbi Yeshua told him, you're wondering about me, that I'm so wise and I have to go on these journeys. Wonder about the two students that you have on dry land, and they are Rabbi Lazar Chisma, Rabbi Yechanan ben Gudgada. They are so wise that they have the ability to estimate kama tipis yesh b'yam. How many drops of water are there in the ocean? If you have the method for it, you can look at the mass of one area and you can figure out how many. That's how wise they are. But ve'elam pas lechel. With all their wisdom, they don't have bread to eat, v'loy beged lilbash, and no clothing to wear. That means that wisdom does not necessarily bring a person a success in his parnas and money. So Rabbi Yeshua hears this, so he decided, you know what, Nasan Daite Shivim Beroish. Let me, or actually Rabbi Gamliel that is. Rabbi Gamliel decided, let me appoint them in a position that they should then have money. And he heard that they had mamish, they're so poor. So Sha'Allah, when he came on to dry land, Shalach Lem, he sent a messenger to them that they should come to him. But V'loi Bo, they didn't want to come to him. So Chaz v'Shalach, he sent another messenger, they should come to him, Ubo, and then they came. So Amar Lehem, he told them, apparently the messenger told them that he wants to promote you, he wants to give you a position. And they didn't want to come. So Rabbi Gamliel told them, why didn't you want to come? Is it that you think that I'm giving you a certain position and this is something that you're running away from greatness? It says in Pirkei Avos, a person should not seek this. So you're looking to run away from this position I want to give you. Don't. It's not an authority. It's not a srara. When you get appointed to a position of authority, you don't see it with the attitude of authority. You see it as a servant that you have to now work. Shenem, as the pasuk says, and this is by the Chavam, I think it's by the Chavam Amelech. Vayidabru Elov Leimar. They spoke to him and they told him, when he was promoted, when Chavam was promoted to be a king, he says, you're going to be a servant for the people. That's what it means to be a king. Another drasha on the pasuk Asher Nasi Yechta. Tan Rabbanu we learned in the Brayis Asher Nasi Yechta. Why does it say this unique term? Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Ashrei Hadair, fortunate is a generation Shan Nasi Shaloi maybe carbon al Shigigasai, that the king is bringing a carbon for an avera that he did b'shaygig. Im Nasi Shaloi maybe carbon. If the Nasi is bringing a carbon, tzarech atolaymar mao hedyet, is it necessary to say what is the story with the commoners, whether they bring a carbon? If they see their king is bringing a carbon, so we know that his generation is also going to bring a carbon when they have an aveda b'shaygig. Ve'im al shigigase mevi carbon tzarech atolaymar mao zedainai. Would you have to say what is the story with B'mezid? Definitely B'mezid, he's going to do tshuva. So this is a maila of the king, that when he sins, he brings a carbon, and when he sins b'mezid, he definitely is doing tshuva. Maskef lo Rav, so Rav asks, Brei Rabbe, Rav, the son of Rav, asks on this drasha. Yudashning is from the word asher, it's fortunate. We're in Yuram Beis, yeah. So he's asking the question, so Elamayata, now based on this, the chsiv, this that the pasuk says, Ve'es asher chotam en hakaidesh yishalem. The sin that he did, this is about a pasuk that speaks about Me'ilah, someone that misappropriated what belongs to Hektish and that he has to pay. That's one pasuk. Or Yeravim ben Nevat served the Vedazari, is a big Rasha. It says about him, Dechsiv Bei Asher Chata, and he sinned, and it uses the term, and Vasha Hechti, he caused the Yidden to sin. So Hachanami, over here as well, by both of these psukim, it uses the term Asher. Are you going to say the Ashrei Hadairu? That this means that fortunate is the generation? Here, there's nothing fortunate about this. So why when it says Asher Nasa Yechta are we darshaning it this way? And it says the Gemara Shani Yachad the Shani Kra B'dibure. Here, it's not just the word Asher, it's the change. By all other karbanis, when it speaks by carbon chatas, it uses the term im, if. Why suddenly there's a change to Asher, which means and that he will. So therefore, with darshaning here, the word Asher means fortunate, Ashrei. Darash of Nachman Bar Rav Chisda. Nachman Rav Chisda darshat Ma'idich Sev. What's the meaning of the pasuk where it says Yesh Hevel Ashenas Haaretz? There's nonsense that happens in the world. The Geimer, the pasuk goes on to say that you see, this is the main thing the Gemara is going to darshan, the pasuk that says Asher Yesh Tzadikim Hashem Magia Aleim K'Maisar Rishayim. There are tzadikim in the world that you see that things happen to them like what should happen to the Rishayim, and there's the opposite also. The pasuk says V'yesh Rishayim Shemagia Aleim K'Maisar Tzadikim. And the Rishayim, that what happens to them is like what should happen to tzaddikim. So Rav Nachman darshans, Ashreyim letzaddikim, fortunate are those tzaddikim shemagia aleim k'maisa Rishayim. That what happens to them is this world is bad things, like what should happen to Rishayim. And that is k'maisa Rishayim she'olam haba. What would happen to Rishayim in olam haba, which means tzaddikim that have suffering in this world. They're fortunate with this. Ba'olam haza, and that's what happens to them here in this world. And the opposite, olam l'rishayim, and woe to those rishayim shemagia lahem k'maisa tzadikim shel olam haba ba'olam haza, that they will experience what happens to the tzadikim in olam haba. In other words, good life. Those rishayim, they experience that good life in this world. That's something which is bad for them. What's the reason for this? So as it says, explanation, because when it comes to tzadikim, whatever punishment for any small thing that they have to get, they get that suffering here in this world, and then in Olam Haba they can go straight into Gan Eden and have only good. But the Rishayim, any good that they do, Hashem gives them the reward here in this world, and that's where they have good life in this world. And then in Olam Haba, over there is where they go into Gehenna. Now, Amar Rava, but Rava didn't like this drasha to dash in the pasuk this way. He said, "Atu tzadiki." When it comes to tzadikim, I achli trei alma. If the tzaddikim would have both worlds good, misanilu, would they be upset about this? If a tzaddik has good life in this world and in the world to come and in Gan Eden, wouldn't that be even better? So we're not going to dash in the pasuk this way. Elo Amar Rava, therefore Rava says, "Ashreim letzaddikim." Fortunate are those tzaddikim shemagia aleim k'maisar Hashem shem elam hazeh. Those tzaddikim that have it good in this world, like the Rishayim that have it good in this world, they have it good in this world and in the world to come. And ba'olam hazeh, and they have that in this world as well. And olam l'Rishayim. And woe to the Rishayim, shemagia aleim k'maisar tzaddikim shel olam hazeh ba'olam hazeh. The Rishayim that they have it bad, like it happens sometimes to tzaddikim. The Rishayim that have it bad in this world and in Gehenim. So that's what the pasuk is saying. That's when you have it bad in both worlds, or for the tzaddikim both worlds are good. That's what the pasuk here is speaking about. Okay, so Rava wants it to be good for tzaddikim both in this world and in Olam Haba. So the Gemara now brings where we see this fulfillment of this, of tzaddikim that have it good in this world, not both begashmis, beruchnis, Rav Papa, Rav Hona, Bereder, Rav Yeshua, also like Hamei de Rava. They both came to Rava to learn by him. Amalu, he says to them, I kimtun mesechta plan and mesechta plan. Did you already learn? Do you know this mesechta, another mesechta? He wanted to know if they're on a level to come and learn by him. Amrulayin, they said yes. So he asked them also, Iasrisu Porte, did you become rich to some extent? Did you make some money that I know that you can learn with me without being distracted? Amrulayin, they said yes. How? The Zavni Katina Da'ara, we bought a little piece of land and that's what we make our money from. So Kare Yalayu, this was an example of Tamid Chachamim that had it proper good in this world, that they're able to learn. And he said on them, Ashreim L'Tzadikim, fortunate are those tzaddikim shemagia aleim k'maisar Hashem shebaylam hazeh baylam hazeh, that they have, like we see sometimes the Rishayim that have it good in this world. Here they were zeicha, these tzaddikim, not only to have olam haba, but even to have it good in this world. Amar Rabba Bar Bachon, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ma'id Chsiv. What's the meaning of the pasuk where it says Ki yisharim darchei Hashem? Straightforward are the paths of Hashem. But tzaddikim yelchu bam, the tzaddikim go on this path, and it's good for them. Upashim yikashlu bam, but the sinners will stumble in the same path. What does it mean? The same path, and the tzaddikim it's good, and the sinners stumble. The analogy of two people, they both brought the carbon Pesach, they roasted the Pesach, but echad achle shay mitzvah. One eats it with a kavanah that it's for a mitzvah, and the echad achle l'shum achila gasa, and the other is eating it, but he doesn't have the kavanah for a mitzvah. He's eating it with the kavanah that it should just be because he's enjoying the meat that he's eating it. Yeah, that's it. And this is Rashi's pshat, that it's a difference in the kavanah here. That's so zeh she'achla l'shem mitzvah, the one that eats it for the sake of the mitzvah. That's what the pasuk is saying. Tzaddikim yechobam, that the tzaddikim go on this pathway, and then he has the mitzvah. And zeh she'achla l'shum achila gasa, the one that eats it just with the kavanah for his own belly to eat for himself, u'paishim yikash lebam. That's a sinner that will stumble on this. So this is the same path. They both ate the carbon Pesach, but one is a mitzvah and one not. Amalei Reish Lakish doesn't like this analogy because he says Rasha Kadeslei, the one that eats the carbon Pesach and he's enjoying the meat for himself and not l'shem mitzvah. You're calling him a Rasha. If you didn't have kavanah, so he's not doing the mitzvah in the best manner. But Pesach milay kachal, didn't he eat the carbon Pesach? Isn't he yaitze the mitzvah of eating the carbon Pesach? So Ella Mashal Shnei Ben Yadam, Reish Lakish says the analogy of this pasuk is two individuals. This one has his wife and his sister in his house, and the other individual also has his wife and his sister in his house. Now, but one of them, his wife was with him, and so he had relations with his wife. But the other individual, he's with his sister, which is a Yisakaris. So Zesh and his damlo yishtay bebayis. Zesh and his damlo yishtay. That's tzaddikim yelchubam, the one that was with his wife. So him, he's a tzaddik. And Zesh and his damlo yachaysay, it was the same circumstance. He had the wife and his sister in his house, but upaishim yikash lebam. He, in the same circumstance, ended up stumbling, and he's a sinner. That's the example of the two that were in the same circumstance, but one is in the good path and one is in the bad path.
He had relations with his sister?
Yeah, that's what happened there, wasn't it? Yeah, in the dark, in his house. So the Gemara asks on this mashal, midami. No, but this is also not a good analogy to explain this pasuk. Because anan kamrin chada derech. We're speaking about the tzaddik and the rasha that are walking down the same pathway, but for one it's good, and for one it's the opposite. But over here, they end up, they're in the same situation, but they end up taking two completely different paths, two different actions altogether. So how could this doesn't explain the pasuk. We're looking to explain two are going down the same pathway, but for one it's good, and for one he stumbles. So, it's the mashal for this is to what happened to Lot and his two daughters. They both were doing the same thing, but for one it's good and for one it's bad. Hey, his daughters, they were doing what they did when they had a relation with their father. They did it l'shem mitzvah. They thought that the world ended and they wanted to bring back humanity. Tzadikim yelchubam. So therefore, they're tzadikim and they went in a good path. But who sheneskav l'shem aveda? But Lot that had a relation with his daughters and he did this for the purpose of an aveda. U'paishim yikash l'bam. In the very same act, for him it was a sin and he stumbled with this. But the Gemara asks, how do you know this about Lot? Maybe Lot also had a good intention with this. Rabbi Yochanan says, no. The whole pasuk where it describes Lot there, in that incident, it's all terminologies that are being used to describe an Aveda. Why? Because what does it say there in the pasuk when it speaks about what Lot did? It says Vayisa Lot. Okay, the Gemara is going to go through this pasuk phrase by phrase, but the pasuk says Vayisa Lot as Eino Vayaras Kol Kikarayat and Kekula Mashkel Fnei Shachar Hashem Esleim V'Samayra. So every term in this pasuk shows that he was there for an aveda. Why? Because it says Vayisa Lot. Where do we see Vayisa as for an aveda? Patisha Eshes Adayna V'Seina. That by Patifa, she raised up his eyes and saw Yosef for an Aveda. When it says here, Es Einov, that Lot picked up his eyes, Einov is a term for an Aveda as well. When he got married to that wife that brought his downfall, it says there, Be'enai, referring to an Aveda. When it says here, Vayar, Lot saw, we see Vayar Isa Shechem ben Chamar. When Shechem ben Chamar saw Dinah, also for an Aveda. When it says it's called Kikar HaYarden, he saw the whole Kikar HaYarden. This term Kikar is interesting. So we see this term Kikar also for an Aveda. Kibi ad Isha Zayna ad Kikar Lecha. By the Zayna, it speaks about, it says this term Kikar Lecha. When it says Kikula Mashke, what does it mean? He said, we see in the pasuk, Elcha Achre Ma'avai, Noisne Lachme Meim, Yitzam Refishti, Shamni Vishikuyai, the ones that give me to drink. So Mashke over here also means a term to drink, which is for the purpose of an Aveda. Therefore, we know that Lot sinned. In fact, the Gemara, but how could you say he sinned? V'hamenes anis. But it was all something that was anis, was against his will, because what was the story there? He was drunk, he had no idea what he was doing. Exactly. So how can we say that this was an Aveda for him? So the Gemara says, Mishon Rabbi Yosi, Barab Chayni. So Tana that is, Tana Mishon Rabbi Yosi, Barab Chayni. The answer, Lama Nokat Al Vav Shebakuma. When it says there in the pasuk V'layada B'Shichba Bakuma, the pasuk says he had no idea. But then on the Vav of the word Bakuma, that he lied with them. They got up. Why does it say a dot on the Bakuma? Shal Bechira, by the first one, by the older daughter. Because it comes to tell you, the act itself that he didn't know. Then Bekuma, when she got up from him, Yada, then he realized. So therefore, it wasn't Aveda. But the Gemara asks him this, when did he realize? After the fact. So it's too late. What should he have done? He's still an Eines. So the Gemara said, what happened has happened. As the answer is, how he did it again. That the next evening, he saw what happened as a result that he got shikavi, he got drunk. So then why did he do it again? So that he shouldn't have drunk again. So therefore, he is to blame for this. Darash Rabbi Darshan, this pasuk will connect back to Lot. The pasuk says, Ach nifsha b'kiryas ois, a brother that sinned, that rebelled and comes from a strong city. Midyanim kibriach armain, and the ones that fight are like a briach armain, like a door that's closed. So what is this pasuk talking about? Ach nifsha b'kiryas ois, this brother that rebelled. Zel Lot. This is who rebelled, the brother, Lot, a brother to Avram, or a cousin to Avram. He rebelled, Shepirish ma Avram, he separated from Avram. Midyanim kibriach armain, what does this mean? That this is what happened as a result. Shehitel midanim, or midyanim, that is, ben Yisrael la'amain. This brought like a antagonism or disconnection between Yidden and Amain, which came from Lot. Shanav, the pasuk says, that Amaini and Moavi, that both come from Lot, are not allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael. What's the meaning of the pasuk where it says L'taiva Yavakish Nifrod, the taiva, one that's separate, wants, and B'chol Tashir Yizgala, and then B'chol Tashir, this will reveal his how bad he is. What does this mean? L'taiva Yavakish Nifrod. Who's the one that wanted a taiva? Zelot Shenifrod Ma'Avram. He had his own desires and he separated from Avram. Then when it says B'chol Tishi Yizgala, the word Yizgala also over here means revealed. Shen Yizgala Kloine B'Batik Knesiyas B'Batim Midrashis. In every Beis HaKnesses, in every Beis Medrash, his disgrace is revealed because of the pasuk that now that his descendants cannot connect to Avram and the Tanan. And furthermore, what's taught in the Beis Medrash is the mission that says Amayni Umayavi Asurin Isra Eilam. They are also forever to marry into Klal Yisrael. Now, V'Amar Ule said Thomas Insa. A similar thing to what we said before regarding two that do a similar act, but for one it's positive and from the one it's negative, and here also by Lot and his daughters. Tamar, she was Mizana with Yehuda, and Vizimri Zina, and Zimri was also Mizana in the story of Balpir. Now Tamar Zin, so when Tamar was Mizana, Yatzim Emenu Malachim and Neviim. From that came out kings and prophets, because it was all the Shem Shemayim, and it was done properly. Zimra Zina, when Zimri was Mizana, Nafla Kamer of Avis Misrael, that brought about a plague, and tens of thousands of Yidden died. Amar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, Rav Nachman Yitzchak said, Gedaila Aveda Lishma, it's greater when you do an Aveda, but it's in the right circumstance, for a good purpose. It's even greater than when a person does a mitzvah, but it's being done for not a good motive. It's done Shalei Lishma. Shanamar, the pasuk says, and this is the story about Yael, that from amongst the women, Yael should be blessed. Eshes Chever Akini, the wife of Chever Akini, Minoshim ba'oil tevayrach. She's blessed even more than the Noshim, than the women in the tent. Now the story of Yael is that she killed Sisera after the Canaan, they ran away, and then she came into the tent of Sisera and she weakened him. She gave him to drink milk. She had relations with him in order to weaken him, and then she was able to kill him. So she did an Aveda seemingly, but all for the purpose to save the Yidden. And she's more blessed than the women in the tent. Who's the women in the tent? Man ninu nashim ba'oil, Sarah Rivka Rachel Aleya. She's even more than the women in the tent, where it says in the Lashon the pasuk, the imais, Sarah Rivka Rachel Aleya. But now the Gemara asks on this expression that it says here, that this what she did is even greater than a mitzvah, shaloi lishma, Eini, how is this true? But v'omer Rav Yehuda Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, that lo'olam yasagadim b'Torah u'v'mitzvahs. A person should always be occupied on learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, and that's a filah shaloi lishma, even if it's being done shaloi lishma. Why? Because shemitoich shaloi lishma, ba lishma. Because then if you stay at that, so then from the shaloi lishma, you'll eventually come to do it lishma. Or like the famous pshat that the Rebbe always brings, the toich, the pnimis of the shaloi lishma is already there, it's lishma. So why are we saying that her Aveda is even greater than this mitzvah? It's a mitzvah, even if it's shaloi lishma. So therefore the Gemara amends it and says, Eime kimitz v'shaloi lishma. When she did this Aveda, but it was with a good motive and she saved Klal Yisrael, it's like a mitzvah lishma. Now what happened? Amar Rabbi Yechanan says, in order for her to weaken him, Sheva be'ilay's bal oisa rasha ba'isa shah. She had relations with him 7 times at that hour. Shanema, the pasuk in all the repetition of the terms that it describes what she did, it says bein raglea, kora, nafal, shochav. And the pasuk goes on to say again, bein raglea, kora, nafal, kasha, kora, sham, nafal. That's the whole pasuk there. So it says 7 terms in the pasuk, and therefore she weakened him and she was able to kill him. But she was all doing this for the good purpose. But the Gemara still asks on this, but isn't the fact that she's having pleasure from this Aveda? So how could you say that she's greater than the Imais, even if she did it for a good purpose and she saved Klal Yisrael and it's totally mutter and it's the right thing, but in the end of the day, there's something, a chesar in here, that she is having a nar from an Aveda. So the Gemara explains, no, she didn't. Even the great and good pleasures of the Rishayim, for tzadikim, it's all bad. They don't have any hanor from this. The Gemara goes back to what we mentioned before. One should occupy in doing Torah and mitzvahs, even if it's not for the lishma of the mitzvah. From doing it shalei lishma, ba lishma, you come to lishma. Why? Where's the source for this? Shebischar, mem beis karbanis, shehikriv balak arasha, in the schar of the 42 karbanis that Balak brought, even though he did it for a wrong motive. He wanted to use that as a reason how he's going to then curse the Yidden, chas v'shalom. Zachav yatzim imenu Rus, he merited that Rus came from him. Now Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina, Rus is bas b'noi shel Egloin. She's the granddaughter of Egloin, which is ben b'noi shel Balak b'l Moav, which was a grandson of Balak, the king of Moav. From where do we know? Where do I see that the Eibusha does not hold back even the reward for a small, a good thing that there's an idle chatter? We see this from here, going back to the story with Lot and his daughters. Because the Ilu Bechira, when it comes to the first daughter that gave birth, the Karye Moav, she called the name of her son Moav. Amalei Rachmana Moshe. So Mayav, it's not modest to call the son Mayav. Mayav means Mayav. This is a child that's born from the father. What kind of a name are you giving to indicate this fact? So therefore, the Eibusher says to Moshe, "Al totzeres Mayav al tiskebal melchama." That do not fight with Mayav, do not bring a war on them. So that melchama hu delay. That means you're not allowed to make a full-out war with them. But you're allowed to cause them pain and suffering. However, let's just finish the Indian here. When it comes to the younger daughter, the Karya Ben Ami, she called the name of her child Ben Ami. It was more modest. So Hamalei over there, the Eibusher says, Al tetzurim al tizgabam klal. Afil tetzuri lo. You should not antagonize them. You should not fight with them at all. Don't cause them any pain at all. Another detail the Gemara adds, Amar Abchia bar Abba, Rabbar Avner is Amar Abishur ben Karcha, Lo'olam yakdim adam l'dvar mitzvah. A person should always, if he has an opportunity of a mitzvah, go forward and do the mitzvah earlier, not later. Why? Because here we see the opposite, that the older daughter went first for a mitzvah, so she had a greater schar. For as a reward for this, that she went one night before her younger sister, Zachsa, she was Zeiche, v'kodmasa arba doiris l'malchus. So from her descendants, she had a descendant which was a king 4 generations before her younger daughter. She had the descendants, there was Oivad, Yishai, and then David, and Shloimeh, and so Oivad was already on a level of authority, so that's how she brings it. But the younger one, when did she have a descendant that became a king? Rechavam, the son of Shloimeh, came from the younger daughter, from Ammon, from Naamah Aminis, not from Rus. The older one came from the Rus, and the younger one from Naamah Aminis, which was 4 generations later. And the difference in the generations is because the older one went one night before, so you always grab an opportunity for a mitzvah earlier, and you get a greater schar.